Developing critical consciousness, empowering learners to question and transform, rethinking school curriculum. I would suggest that we stop treating education as a one-way transmission of information and start seeing it as a shared process of discovery where students and teachers engage as co-learners. True education should be a space where students are encouraged to challenge assumptions, interrogate dominant narratives, and critically examine the world around them. But do we create such an environment? Or do we continue reinforcing a system where students are expected to absorb pre-approved knowledge without questioning its origins or implications? Is it enough to prepare students for jobs? Or should education also help them understand who they are, why they think the way they do, and how their perspectives have been shaped? When students become aware of their cognitive patterns, biases, and conditioning, they begin to question the structures that define their realities. Shouldn't self-awareness be a starting point for learning, an invitation to explore how personal experience, culture, and environment shape understanding? If education merely teaches students what to think instead of how to think, can we truly call it learning? Take the way we teach science. Do we encourage curiosity, or do we limit it to memorization of disconnected facts? Students learn about environmental issues, but do they truly grasp the intricate web of Earth systems, the deep interconnection of water cycles, tectonic shifts, and the delicate balance between human activity and nature? If we presented geology not as a set of static facts, but as an ongoing dynamic interaction between Earth's forces, wouldn't students begin to see the world as an evolving system rather than a collection of isolated subjects? Consider something as fundamental as the food we eat and the clothes we wear. Shouldn't students be encouraged to ask, where does my food come from? Who made my clothes? What systems are at play behind every item I consume? If education is about developing critical awareness, why do we teach students to understand supply chains, but rarely ask them to analyze the power structures, labor conditions, and environmental impacts behind global industries? Shouldn't students be taught to navigate the world as conscious participants rather than passive consumers? And what about social engagement? Do we equip students to understand the complexities of the communities they live in? Or do we keep their education neatly contained within the walls of a classroom? True learning happens through dialogue, experience, and immersion in the real world. If students aren't given the opportunity to work within communities, engage in meaningful service, and critically examine social structures, how will they ever develop the skills to challenge injustice, advocate for change, and participate in collective action? If education is meant to liberate rather than condition, why do we continue reinforcing a system that prioritizes memorization over reflection, obedience over inquiry, and conformity over transformation? Isn't it time we asked ourselves, what is the true purpose of education? Is it simply to create competent workers, or should it be about fostering thoughtful, conscious individuals who have the courage to question, to rethink, and to reshape the world they inherit? If education is meant to shape individuals into active participants in the world, then why do we confine learning to narrow cultural frameworks? Why do we expose students to only a fraction of human knowledge and history, as if the experiences and contributions of entire civilizations can be reduced to footnotes in textbooks? When students are taught only one dominant narrative, one language, one worldview, one version of history, do they really develop a true understanding of the world, or just a conditioned perspective that limits their ability to engage with its diversity? What happens when students are encouraged to step beyond these boundaries? When they read literature that challenges their beliefs, engage with histories that question dominant narratives, or learn languages that connect them to new ways of thinking? Shouldn't education open doors to the world, not confine students to a singular, pre-approved version of it? What if students were not just encouraged to respect other cultures, but to immerse themselves in them, to understand different traditions from within, to recognize that knowledge is fluid and shaped by perspective? If we truly want students to become global citizens, doesn't that require an education that transcends borders, fosters cross-cultural dialogue, and challenges ethnocentric worldviews. But even as we expand knowledge, do we also teach students how to navigate the emotional and psychological weight of engaging deeply with the world? Do we prepare them to handle uncertainty, embrace complexity, and process the discomfort that comes with questioning long-held beliefs? Education is often framed as intellectual development, but how often do we acknowledge that learning is also an emotional and psychological process? When students begin to unravel the injustices embedded in social systems, do we give them the emotional tools to handle that realization, to channel their frustration into meaningful action rather than apathy or despair? How do we expect students to engage critically with the world if they are not first taught to engage critically with themselves, to understand their own emotions, their biases, their fears, their motivations? If education does not equip students with emotional intelligence, resilience, and self-reflection, how can they ever navigate conflict, build meaningful relationships, or advocate for change in ways that are constructive rather than reactive? Why do we separate personal growth from academic learning when the two are deeply intertwined? And what about the way we teach students to think about work? Why do we still condition them to see it as a duty, an obligation, a means of survival, rather than a space for self-expression, creativity, and contribution? Why is the primary question in career counseling still, what will make you the most money, rather than what fulfills you? What aligns with your strengths? What impact do you want to have? If students are only taught to fit into existing economic structures, rather than to question, challenge, and innovate within them, are we really preparing them for meaningful careers, or just ensuring their compliance in systems that may not serve them? What if education helped students discover what work could look like outside of conventional pathways? What if they were encouraged to create, build, and redefine industries instead of just preparing to enter them? What if instead of conditioning them to see success as external validation, we taught them to define success by purpose, by passion, by the contribution they feel called to make? Shouldn't education be about liberating students to create a life that is aligned with who they truly are, rather than training them to fit into pre-existing molds? If education does not help students expand their understanding of the world, develop the emotional resilience to navigate it, and empower them to shape their own futures, then what is it really doing? If we do not trust students with the responsibility to think, to question, to explore, then are we truly educating them or just conditioning them to accept the world as it is? And if we believe that education should be a tool for liberation rather than control, then what would it look like to truly teach in a way that fosters curiosity, courage, and the conviction to create change?